Well, good morning. How many of you have had more than one cup of coffee so far today? That's good. That's good. We are so grateful for Victory Highway because as a ministry headquartered in Denver, Colorado, we send itinerant speakers all around the world. Tens of thousands of spiritual decisions are made every year. Victory Highway partnered with us in the late 90s and early 2000s, and so much happened that you grew fruit on trees literally around the planet. And what I mean by that is churches were established that are meeting today that didn't exist prior to our partnership. In Christchurch, New Zealand, where they were earthquake victims, there's now a church in Singapore. There's a church in North Africa. There's a church in India. There are people who started a church in the Silicon Valley. 3 of our students started a church in Charlotte, North Carolina, who built this church called Elevation Church and Elevation Music. Stephen Furtick and Buck Bueller and Lori Nelson, and it's impacted people literally around the globe. We have been training teenagers and young adults and whole families that come for 5 days of training, if not a whole summer or a portion of their summer. And by God's grace, kingdom laborers are increasing. I used to sign my letters. The harvest is ripe, but the laborers are few. Now I sign them. The harvest is ripe, and the laborers are increasing. And honestly, it's so cool to be at a place that partnered with us to help a lot of those things happen. Even the writing of a book that has been translated around the world transpired through our partnership called You Are God's Plan A, and There Is No Plan B. Movement. What's the word movement mean? That's what I was full of as a kid. I was so full of movement that my loving aunt nicknamed me Dwight the Fright. I had more energy than I knew what to do with, and most of my energy was moving all the wrong directions. My sister said to my parents one day, "Mom and Dad, Dwight wants to be good, and he tries to be good. He just can't be good." And I remembered thinking, yeah, she's so right, I'm just sunk. Honestly, that was until a Bible was passed to me that I could understand, and I was reading, looking for, is there hope for me? Is there help for me? And then I read about a guy that Jesus met him at his workplace, because this guy didn't go to a place where there were walls or a building, but that was okay because Jesus was modeling his plan A, and he modeled it by just living it out. And so he showed up at this guy's workplace after work. The guy was cleaning up after work and just kind of cleaning up. He was a fisherman, so he was cleaning up his nets after work. And Jesus started a conversation with him. He saw him, he stopped, spent some time with him. And as they talked, Jesus tested him, I think, to see if he'd be a man who understood he was meant to move on purpose, that there was a plan for his life. So he started with a question. Hey, Peter, how about we take your boat back out? I know you're done with work, but how about we take it back out? And they did. Jesus heard Peter's response. First one was, "'Cause you say so?" Okay. So he had a man that was moving with him, but they get out in the water, and suddenly Jesus takes this ordinary guy, his ordinary first century boat, and something so cool starts happening that I would say the ordinary became the extraordinary, and a miraculous catch of fish starts happening that Peter's never seen in his whole life. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, like, do I strike you as a miserable person? I'm not. I tell people all the time worldwide, welcome to the joy of laborship. When you start moving with Jesus and Jesus shows up, even Dwight the Fright, even ordinary people get to lead extraordinary lives of meaning and purpose. And Peter's life that day started being turned around by just hanging with Jesus and letting Jesus sort of begin to direct traffic and tell him what to do. Why don't you put your nets over here and let's do this? And all of a sudden, cool things are going on. But Peter feels a little like overwhelmed, like, maybe Jesus doesn't understand that I'm not like one of those perfect guys down at the synagogue. So I was reading along and I watched when he said to Jesus, I'm a sinner. And Dwight the Fright is very focused on what will Jesus' response be now. Does he hang out with people like him? And I was so deeply moved when I saw Jesus say, hey, why don't you come and, you probably know what he said. He said, come and follow me. Let's hang out together. I'll show you how to lead a high impact life. Let me ask you, how many of you want your life to make an impact? You don't want to become extinct without significance. You don't want your life to have ended and your life never meant anything. It never had an impact. How many, I'll raise two hands. My whole life, even though I was Dwight the Friday, I've always wanted. How many of you wanted your life to make an impact? How many of you want your life to make an impact? Yes, absolutely. You know why? You've been hardwired by your Creator who also wants that. Good news for you. God said through his prophet Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you. And they're plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. But then for me, it was like, well, okay, if you have a plan for even guys like Peter and like me, then how do I find that plan? I think it was illustrated for me one Christmas when I gave my nephew a G.I. Joe Tiger Force helicopter. I didn't know what one was, but I found out it was the number one desired wish on his Christmas list. And we're not far from Christmas. We ask questions, what would you like? And I found out it was an inexpensive gift at Toys R Us. I signed up, bought it, but when he opened it, this box was full of a bunch of pieces. It didn't come pre-assembled. Look complicated, and all these pieces in this box, I pulled the instruction sheet out, and some of us who have had this experience, you start unfolding the instruction sheet, and by the time you get all the instructions in front of you, and you have to go grab some spectacles because it's fine print, you start reading, it's going to be an all-day project, you're reading number 1 and 2, but I heard little hands on the other side of the paper putting pieces together. I tried to warn him, you probably can't get it that fast, but sure enough, they were correct. I read 7, 8, 9, and he's on to 10, 11, and 12. And I finally lowered the instructions, all these words, and I said to my sister, psst, you may have a genius. I was pretty excited. Maybe we had a genius in the family, and so I'm going to cut him off of the pass. I read 23, 24, 25. He's on 26, 27, 28. His little hands are just lickety-split, and I lowered the paper to get everybody in the room, the whole extended family, to see what is happening. He is building this thing without reading any of this stuff. How can he get it so quick? When suddenly I saw them laughing at me. I said, anybody want to let me in on have you ever done this? No, I haven't done this before. I said, what's going on? And one of my uncles said, hey, turn the paper around, and you need to see what he's seeing. And when I turned it around, you're laughing because he was seeing on his side a picture with all the parts and arrows pointing to how it all went together. No wonder he got it faster. And no wonder the Gospel of John, chapter 1:14 says, the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. He became the model. The Word became flesh and lived among us, John 1:14 says, and we could see, we beheld his glory full of grace and truth. In other words, fix your eyes on Jesus and learn his plan. If you want to lead a high impact life, follow him. Fix your eyes on him. Because he actually was modeling a plan. The first thing he starts telling people is, what I'm looking for this kingdom movement is laborers. In fact, we'll just take a look at the time that he finally, verse 35 of Matthew chapter 9, he had gone around all the cities and the villages. Jesus was teaching in their synagogues. He was proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing all kinds of disease, every weakness and infirmity. And when he saw the throngs, he was moved with pity and sympathy for them because they were bewildered, harassed and distressed and dejected and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is indeed plentiful. But what's the next word? But the what? Let me hear you say it again. What's few? The laborers are few. So pray to the Lord of the harvest to thrust laborers into his harvest. I had one farmer who stopped after one of the services this morning and said, man, when you used that word laborers and used it with harvest, he said, I used to think about all the stuff out there that could be done if I had enough laborers to get it in. Well, that's what Jesus was thinking about. And what I liked about the word was he didn't say the harvest is right, but the Christian celebrities are few. He didn't say the harvest is right, but the leaders are few. He used a common word. Like roll up your sleeves and, let's get into the mud puddles of human need where the work needs done. I'm looking for laborers. What's a laborer? Somebody who just loves God with everything in them and will love the person near them in any given moment. A laborer gets things done. They don't just converse with Jesus. They don't just attach to Jesus, but they understand in the attachment is intended for movement. A laborer moves with Jesus. I took my children a number of years ago to the park, and they were playing on park equipment, and we were having a great time when a big van pulled in, and there was a disabled veteran plate on the back of the van, and as a young family started getting out, the two little kids got approval, you could see, for them to head on, and you could see a man getting out in a wheelchair, and he was trying to make his way over there, but he had a few things he was trying to tend, and his little girl started running so fast, faster than her legs could really navigate, and all of a sudden I watched her sprawl across the asphalt, and she began screaming in terrible pain to her dad, "Dad!" And I looked over and I saw him almost lunge out of his wheelchair because he wanted to get to where she was, but he couldn't, and I yelled across, "Do you want me to help?" And of course he did, but I looked at his face, and everything in his face said that his heart and his head, his mind wanted to be there, not over here. But the rest of the day I kept thinking, what is that like? What's that like to want to be where your body won't take you? When I felt Jesus said, I'll tell you what it's like, Dwight. I'm the head of my church, the body. They're attached to me, but sometimes they're quadriplegic. They're sort of paralyzed, like they surely can't be in movement with me. Then I want to be over there, and I want to be there, and I want to be over there, and I could be if I had a body that would enter into my movement, in me, live and move and have their being. And by the way, it's the best and fastest way to lead a high-impact life. And that's what Peter learned. That's what I started learning as I read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And what I put in the book called Plan A, I found out it was simple. It was simple and actually impactful to join Jesus in his movement. And the first thing I started noticing was the first thing that they were learning from him was his plan A was not an upfront plan. He didn't teach them how to be public speakers. And in fact, his plan was not an upfront plan. His plan was an up-close plan. He was Emmanuel. What does Emmanuel mean? Emmanuel means God what? God with us. Not God up front, God up close. And in fact, Jesus moved among people. He got so up close. One time people said, "Where's this kingdom you're talking about?" And he said, watch me. He said, "The kingdom of God is at hand." In other words, it's arm's length. It's up close. By the way, are you feeling a little impacted right now? A little bit, he said. Hear me. You may impress from a distance, but you impact up close. And you didn't say you wanted to impress this world. You said you wanted to impact. And for you, how many of you in this room, the greatest impact in your life was people who were willing to be up close to you? Not up front, but up close. They got in the mud puddles of human need where your life was at, and you needed that. How many of you in this room, it was people who were up close who made the impact? Eye to eye, heart to heart. That's where impact happens. He taught it up close. Some of you are relieved because you would not want to be the upfront speaker this morning. You're really glad Jesus didn't teach a plan A that involved public speaking. Some people, it's a worse fear than death, the fear of public speaking. How many of you? Some of you, it's like, I wouldn't want to do that. Well, think about it. The guys that Jesus collected, the people he began to set in movement, we don't see them giving upfront speeches. We see them as they fix their eyes on Jesus, learning that sometimes he held kids, sometimes he walked over and touched a leper. Sometimes he sat over non-bottled spring water with one woman who was of a different ethnic origin, and he sat with her over non-bottled spring water, and they just had a conversation up close, eye to eye. She didn't have people who did that, and it was transformational for her. You even got a little short guy. He would have looked a lot probably like the movie actor Danny DeVito. His name was Zacchaeus. He was a short guy, and he was pretty well known, and he climbed up in a tree because he wanted to see from a distance who Jesus was. And Jesus looked up and said, "Get out of that tree. Come on down. I don't do up front. I do up close. Zacchaeus, let's go to your house and share a meal." Impact. The first thing Jesus modeled with plan A was up close. And for many of us, there's a world out there. That's what they're hungry for. Jesus inside you getting to be up close, and he's saying, will you join me in my movement? Well, where would I do that? Well, that's the second thing they noticed. Peter, Jesus didn't make him come to a building. Jesus went to him. He talked to him at his workplace. He met him in fact, Matthew, who's telling you the story this morning of his own life. If you were to go earlier in that chapter, in Matthew 9, verse 9, Matthew would tell you that he was just doing his work collecting taxes one day when Jesus took some time in the mainstream of life to impact him. See, the second thing you need to know is Jesus not only taught an up-close plan, but he taught a mainstream plan. What's mainstream? Well, that's where you work. It's where you live. Notice something. Not one of those he attached himself to in the beginning to establish a kingdom movement, not one of them was a leading rabbi from a rabbi training school. They were all regular mainstream people. Hey, James and John, you're running a small business. I could use some small business guys. Hey, Matthew, you're working for IRS, collecting some taxes. I could use a guy like you. And hey, Peter, you're kind of mouthy and impulsive. I could probably use a guy like you. You just come follow me. I'll teach you how to lead a high-impact life. And he just collected mainstream people. Why did he do that? I'll tell you why I think he did it. Because those of us who are in that category that Ephesians 4 talks about, who are given the gift of pastoring or teaching or evangelism, we're supposed to equip the laborers for the works of ministry up close. But guess what happens to us? When we try to get up close to people, it's happened to me. I remember one time in particular, the guy said, you're a real, dude, he's a real reverend? Are you a real reverend? And I said, well, the last time I checked, I am. He said, Oh no, that joke I told 5 minutes ago. Listen, I don't usually tell jokes like that. I'm so embarrassed. And listen, my grandmother's real religious, and she goes all the time, and I've been a few times with her. And Joe, I'm sorry, Reverend. I've been looking for Joe all night. That's my buddy. Joe, excuse me. Nice to meet you, Reverend. And I can see him almost sweating as he's running toward Joe. I can almost hear him saying to Joe, let's stay on this side of the room. That's the Reverend over there. Not comfortable. No wonder when Jesus came to earth, he wasn't born into a rabbi's home. He wasn't born into a political leader's home. His dad was a carpenter, a mainstream guy. And when he introduced himself, I think what he said was, hello, I'm Jesus. I'm from Nazareth. Nazareth, where's that? Never heard of that. Well, it's a small little place. Anything good come from Nazareth? Well, I don't know. I came from Nazareth. Well, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm a carpenter. I'm a builder. I learned this trade with my dad, building. And it was probably almost tongue-in-cheek, I built the universe with my dad, and I'm building a kingdom with my father, and, I'm a builder. But people didn't panic because he was a carpenter, and he could stay up close in the mainstreams, where you do life. Powerful. The guys he collected were mainstream people. The third thing you notice, as Jesus was modeling how to lead a high-impact life, which you said you want to do, is let me reintroduce you to a powerful number. A number that has been overlooked and undervalued far too long, and it's a big number. You need to know what this number is. It's the power and the value of one. Jesus modeled this time and again. The impact of one. In fact, the one who's telling us about Jesus saying he's looking for laborers, earlier in the chapter, in verse 9 of chapter 9 of Matthew, Matthew tells you about the first day Jesus met him when he was collecting taxes. And Matthew wants you to know, thousands of years later, that not only his one life was impacted, but many lives since by Jesus seeing him. When my grandmother used to inherit Dwight the Fright, because it was her responsibility to give my parents a night off. She always had a plan to try to focus my energy in a constructive direction. And I can remember she had a big tin of dominoes in her downstairs closet. And sometimes she'd pull that out and she'd just dump all those dominoes all over her big, massive dining room table, and they'd just go flying. And then I'd start with Grandma just lining up dominoes. How many of you, have you ever lined dominoes up? How many of you ever done this? Lined up dominoes, So I'm lining up dominoes, There's so many hundreds of them, and it's going to take me a while. And she's got me focused, So that's a good thing. I'm focused, and I'm lining up, and she makes her way into the kitchen. She starts baking cookies, and I can smell that aroma wafting into my room where I'm lining up dominoes. And finally, I get the last one in place. And I call Grandma in to see this amazing. But as I'm just ready, she grabbed my arm. Grandson, don't touch that yet. What? Don't touch that domino yet. I was about to hit that one, but she said, no, just a minute. Grandson, I want you to pretend you are so small. Now, this was before the Disney movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So, she's way ahead of her time. I want you to pretend you're so small that all you can see is that one domino in front of you. But grandson, if you impact that domino just right, it's going to impact another one. That's going to impact another one. It's going to impact another one. And you don't have to worry about number 2 or 13 or 97 or 105 or 353. You just worry about the one in front of you and watch God take care of the domino ripple effect. Time and again, I would read the scriptures and I'd see Jesus focus on one life. And suddenly I could start seeing the domino ripple effect. And I realized it's never just one. I wrote so many letters to my grandparents who adopted a 15-year-old girl out of an orphanage that she'd been dropped off in as an infant all the way to age 15 until 2 people took that one life and adopted her at age 15 and began to pass their love for her and their love for Jesus into her. And that woman began to take that into herself. I didn't know that I was a future domino, that I would receive what they gave to her. He would pour into me, and eventually I would pour into others who would pour into others, and it would domino around. But it's always been that way. I remember even in our neighborhood, there was a little girl who was a latchkey kid. Her mother was in an insane asylum, and her father had 5 kids he didn't know what to do with it. She was the youngest, and my mother knew what it was like to grow up overlooked and undervalued. So Carol was at our house about as much as we were. And I can remember my mom showing her how to bake cookies at our counter. And my mom would even let her help clean the house with the rest of us who had chores and duties. And Carol was like one of us. But my mom knew she needed to feel that sense of high value. She wasn't just one. And today, Carol is leading a women's ministry in Indianapolis, Indiana, of 1,000 women because there was a woman in her neighborhood who understood the high, powerful impact of up close in the mainstreams, one life at a time. Well, Dwight, how does it begin? What do I do? Well, Put your hands in front of you. We're all going to do this, so nobody's going to get out looking cool. So put your hands in front of your eyes like they're blinders. You ready for this? Come on, you put your coolness away. Put your hands in front of your eyes. Now pull them away. This is the first thing they learned from Jesus. They learned from him that he would see people. In fact, why don't you say the word see as you pull them away? 1, 2, 3, see. This is what they noticed with Jesus. He would see people other people wouldn't see. In fact, Matthew, who's telling you this story, he was used to people walking on the other side of the street because they didn't want their tax collected by him. They didn't even like him, I have homeless friends who say, there's a ton of people. They kind of see us, but they kind of don't, They just walk past us like they don't see us. It's a horrible thing. My son, who was going to a new school, I asked him after a couple weeks, Drayson, how's it going at your new school? He said, Dad, we were at the family dinner table. Dad, I am invisible. I said, I'm sorry, what? Dad, I'm invisible. I thought, has he watched too many superhero flicks? What's this I'm invisible thing? I don't know what he's talking about. I looked at my wife, and she's at our ministry resource table this morning. She didn't know what he was talking about, and I said, son, put your fork down. I was worried about him. What's he going to do if he thinks he's invisible? Maybe something really stupid. So I said, son, put your fork down. Son, I see you. You are not invisible. He said, Dad, I know you see me, but Dad, at my new school, when I go out for morning recess, they're all looking for each other because they went to school together last year, and they run straight past me, Dad. Nobody sees me. They run that direction and that direction, right around me, Dad. Sometimes they'll even almost push me out of the way, they don't even see that I'm there. They don't see me. And I go to the cafeteria, Dad, and I get my tray, and I sit down, and I wait. They're coming out, and they're looking for each other, and they walk straight past me, Dad. I sit there all by myself, and after school, Dad, I wait 13 minutes for my mom to get Dara, my sister, at her school, and Dad, I stand there for 13 minutes and they move all around me. And Dad, nobody sees me. I'm invisible, Dad. I'm invisible. At this point, he is full of emotion and passion. And I sit there wondering how many people on the planet feel that way every day. They feel invisible. She's been your cashier at Walmart 3 times before. She recognizes you, but you've been so busy seeing your wallet or your purse, you haven't yet seen her. He sees her. He's waiting for someone to see her. There's an African tribe, when you're walking one direction, will say, I see you, and the other person will say, I am here. And it's the gift of presence. We were on the west side of Denver, Colorado, where we live, and that's quite a ways from the east side where we're at. And we stopped at a restaurant. We needed to grab some dinner before we made our way home, and we were at a Red Robin restaurant, and I watched a kid waiting on what I thought was way too many tables. And by the time he got to our table, he was literally perspiring, and I looked at him and I said, John, are you okay? And he said, dude, do I know you? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think we've met before. We live on the east side, but I saw you waiting on a bunch of tables. And look, you're even perspiring. Are you okay, John? Dude, you're freaking me out. Why are you calling me John? Because, I know it's a common name and everything, but that's weird. That's actually my name. Did somebody tell you what my name is? I said, no, nobody told me what your name is. How'd you know what my name is? I said, well, I was almost embarrassed to tell him. And I tapped his chest and I said, because you're wearing it right there, John. He said, oh. Why did John forget he was wearing his name? Let me tell you. Because nobody sees him. He's the waiter. And I want this and I want that. And oh yeah, and give me fries. He's not a person, he's the waiter. But what happened that night is John kept waiting on all his other tables and running back to tell us more than his name. He had a story and he had chapters in his story. And by the end of the night, he looked at me and said, sir, you and your family are going to come and see me again, right? And I said, oh, well, we live on the east side and you're on the west side. Yeah, but you're going to come and see me, right? He was pretty sure we'd started a relationship. And we had. It just started by seeing him. There's a whole world out there. Matthew wants you to know that on the day, he said specifically, verse 9, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man, not a tax collector. He saw a man named Matthew. That was transformational for Matthew. The next thing that was transformational was now I want you to, come on, put your hands up, put your dukes up. We're going to look like patrol guards, like we're going to save children. We're going to stop the traffic, you know? This was the second thing they noticed with Jesus, that he would stop with people. He would see and stop. Oh, you're good. Some of you are already doing the two things together. Yes, he would see people that other people weren't seeing, and he would stop. Oh, you're saying it too. Come on, we're getting good. You're the most awake crowd. Let's do this. He would see and stop. Robustly say it again, because this is our plan for high impact living. We're going to see and stop. And time and again, when you'd see him see the leper, and he would stop and touch her. Even one woman, she kept trying to push through the crowd, and she finally touched him, and power went out from him, and she was kind of cool with that, you know. She didn't have an encounter with him, but she had a power, man. It was released from him, and he stopped. Who touched me? Somebody touched me. And the disciples said, everybody's pushing, shoving, brushing up against you. You're asking who touched? No, somebody touched me. And it was almost like stop and see instead of see and stop, but he knew both were important. And when she came out from the crowd, he said, daughter, your faith has made you well. He knew she didn't just need the stop. She needed the dignity of being seen and highly valued and called daughter. See and stop. It can happen in seconds. I was traveling across Denver, running late for an appointment. Has anybody ever run late for an appointment and prayed that the green light ahead would stay green long enough for you to get through it? I was literally praying, Lord, I thought green light would really be helpful to me, and yellow to red happened so fast, and there I am, stopped at a traffic light, getting further behind, I thought. When I looked to see the street sign to see where I was in Denver, and that's when I saw him. He was holding another sign underneath the street sign. And as I saw him, he looked like me, about the same age. He looked normal, regular. The sign said, just lost my job, 3 kids, anything would help, desperate. And I grabbed my wallet. I had nothing in it. My kids had cleaned me out the night before, and so I'm scrambling in the car trying to find something, and he must have seen intentionality in my car, because the next thing I know, he's by my window. And I rolled my window down, and I said, sir, I'm so sorry. I thought I had something. And my mind raced back to the book of Acts. Guys who trained under Jesus with see and stop. And one guy, they were on their way somewhere, and a guy needed money, and they said, silver or gold have we none. But so I didn't say, I thought that'd be a little weird to say, silver or gold have I none. But I did say, you saw me scrambling. I thought I had some money, but I got nothing but I have Jesus. And sir, what's your name? And he said, Delage. And I said, I'm sorry, what was that? Delage? Did you say Delage? That's a new one for me. His eyes opened about twice their normal width. He said, why do you want to know my name? And I said, because Delage, I wish I had something to give you, but I do. I'm a man of prayer, and I'm going to be praying like crazy for you. I'm on your team. I'll be praying with you. At that point, the light had turned green. I had somebody honking behind me, and I needed to make my way on. And out of my open window, as I'm pulling out, I yelled back, Delage, I'm praying for you right now. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and there stood that man weeping, yelling back at me, sir, I need that more than anything. For the remainder of the day, days, nights, kept praying for Delage. Went back to that corner trying to find him. I believe prayer changes things. I could never find Delage after that, but I know that my stop that day was even just to pray with someone who needed to feel someone in the boat with him. That's what they call fellowship. He needed someone, and Jesus saw him. He needed somebody to more than see him, to stop with him. Oh, and one more thing. You knew there'd be one more thing. Spend time with You're already, oh, you're good. Spend time with. We're going to do this together. Come on, get your hands out. We're going to spend time with. Spend time with. Say it out loud. Spend time with. See if you can put them all together. If you and I are Jesus followers and we're going to be a part of his movement, we're going to what? We're going to see, we're going to stop, and we're going to spend time with. Do you know that your best witness is your witness? There are many people who will never know or want to know how much you know until they know and experience how much you care. And your witness that's best is your witness. Time spent, lives are transformed. When Jesus would spend time with, things happened. Bob, who read Plan A, he got halfway through and he pulled me aside at one of my son's basketball games and he said, dude, come here. I'm reading through this thing. I started crying my eyes out. What in the world? You think there's something wrong with me? I said, no, Bob, I don't think there's something wrong with you. I think God has a plan for you. And I think you're crying because you know it too. He said, you should see what's happening at work. At my workplace, man, I'm seeing even vendors that come selling stuff to us. I'm seeing them, I'm stopping. I spend a little time and all of a sudden it's like Jesus is setting up shop through me. I don't even understand it. He says, crazy. I've never done this in my life before. And one by one, the stories keep unfolding of people who are discovering the joy of kingdom laborship, not inside four walls, but in the mainstreams, up close, one life at a time. This is the way the Israelites used to pray before Jehovah Jireh, their provider, from whom every good and perfect gift flows. Lord, you've poured so much into us. The fact that we sit here this morning is one of your good gifts. The fact that for many of us here, we have known you, times when you saw us, stopped and spent time with us, and it transformed everything for us. And our story isn't that unlike Peter's or Matthew's. Thank you. Thank you. But now you want us to be not your paralyzed body. You want us to be your body moving, and the things you've poured into us. With our hands, a demonstration of understanding. You've poured a lot in. We want to begin to pour out. And one of those is that no one would feel invisible around us. We'll see who you see. Whether they're in aisle 4 at Walmart and standing there weeping because that's the aisle she was in 2 weeks ago when her husband had an argument and now he's passed and she's missing him so. And we're walking down that aisle. We see her, but now you're saying, will you stop? You see her crying. Will you spend enough time to say, are you okay? Can I help? Lord, you've poured so much into us. May we begin to be on movement with you and begin to pour that out into the lives of others and experience what I would call the joy of Plan A living. On mission with you as your everyday, along the way, kingdom laborers. We love you, Lord. And all God's people said,